What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain. My co-hosts are Tesko and Rip Kinney, and we are all music producers, artists, and producer coaches. This show is where we discuss all things music production and interview amazing creatives about their origins, their process, and whatever else comes up. This week is episode 106, Spencer Tribwell on presence, breathwork, and happy accidents. Spencer Tribwell is a creative coach, event planner, breathwork and meditation facilitator, and much more. In this episode, we dive into his previous life as a flying squirrel, facing and naming fears, sitting with emotions without judgment, how creative stress brought him to meditation, the power of breathwork, the original source code of the universe, how curiosity leads to presence, which leads to flow and synchronicity, and giving ourselves the grace of happy accidents. The song of the week is Tesko's song, Friends. Check it out at the links below. Please follow Spencer at Creative Living and Friends. And support our sponsors when you're down in those links. Dojo TV, free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis. And we do this class live every other Tuesday at 6 Pacific. Tesko's Patreon, where you can get access to Tesko's private Discord, track feedback, private lessons, and more. The weekly downloads, where you can learn from Il Gates, our mentor, and his private weekly group lessons, and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute, the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. Check out our website, thehumanmusicpodcast.com, to follow us on socials, get free sound packs, and find out where we're streaming. And let's get on into this episode with Spencer Tribwell.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesko with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast.
Human Music Podcast.
Don't forget the C.
Is.
It's not the
Facts.
HMP. It's the HMP. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually,
THMP.
in an acronym, don't you normally not have whatever?
Yo, we don't play by their rules.
We're not Human Music Podcast. We're the one and only.
Yeah. Plus, like THMP is like an abbreviated like thump, and like HMP would just be
Hump.
like hump.
I
The Hump
do
Podcast.
enjoy both, but this podcast is more about the thump than the hump.
Yeah, it's definitely more leading into our topics. Off the rails 2 seconds in.
Shout outs to
per
the people
usual.
listening on Hump Day.
Hey, that is tomorrow from the day things come out and get recorded.
True. So that's probably 8 days from now, or
Yeah.
maybe 15. I don't know.
Oh man, could be.
Hello
These
from the
questions and more will not be answered on this podcast because today we actually have a good friend of mine. What's up? Shouts out to my dude Spencer Tribwell.
Welcome. What's good, Spence?
What's up, dudes? Stoked to be here. I feel like I'm in for goofball hour, and I'm stoked about that. Yeah, I'm always like wanting to get a little bit more into my heart and my body and out of my head, so I feel like I come to the right place.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So
Thanks
don't
for
we
taking
all?
the time.
Don't we all?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And yeah, I warned you right off the bat that at the start of this podcast, we would immediately goof around, and then I would ask you a question, and that question is, Spencer Tribwell, what is your superhero origin story? How did you become the amazing creative that you are today?
Shoot, man. I have no idea how I'm going to answer that question, but we're going to find out right now.
Yeah.
I would say that story starts long before I was in this body, and I am one of those strange people who is fortunate enough to remember things before I landed in my first breath in this body. And so my superhero origin story starts in a galaxy far, far away, in a distant star, in a flying squirrel other dimension that has greatly informed my superpowers in this life. And how I came to discover that was through some very strange transmissions that I found on YouTube by a amazing creative person who teaches something called Reconnecting with Spirit. And while there are always many threads that come together into a moment of realization of things like being a flying squirrel, extra dimensional being in a human body, what really brought it together was this weird idea that I got one day of what would it be like if I scroll through radio stations and just allow myself to be talked to by the stories, by the voices that I hear on the radio station, and allow my intuition to string those together, and that the things that I hear inside of myself in response to what's being played on the radio, what if that could become something? And as I went on that dance with scrolling through random radio stations, I was driving a work truck. What came through was all of these memories, all of these vivid visualizations of life on other planets, life in other realms. And it sparked something in me, and it really stuck with me, and it started to come alive in my lucid dreams. And it really like brought me into a state of grace that hasn't really stopped since. I would say that the challenges have been many, but I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be weird. So
Amen.
I'm gonna pause there.
Me too. I'm
That's the
grateful you're
coolest
weird
one
as
we've
well.
got.
Yeah, like I think you're actually the first person to tell that as if it was an actual superhero origin story, which already puts you a cut above every other guest that we've had on this podcast. So just a little golf clap for you there.
Yeah, most people are like, so I cracked like an early version of Ableton, and then
Very not romantic, yeah. So the question on everyone's minds: were you a flying squirrel in your past life, or did I misinterpret the story?
No, you got it. You got it spot on.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Oh, it was great.
It was nuts. I totally took that from Tesko. If you didn't hear that,
yes,
play the audio back. I wasn't the first, but that's great.
Thank you for repeating it. It's worth the echo.
Yeah.
Well, life is all about the nuts. And I discovered in that previous life as a flying squirrel that if one wants to elegantly explore the forest and find out all about the magical life forms that are being created moment by moment by moment, what better way to do it than gliding through the trees and hopping from branch to branch. And what I remember from that life is just awe and delight at the natural magic and wonder of nature. And it was in a space called the living library is the way I hear it. And it's like, if you can imagine like a genetic library of new life being created just for the joy of creating it. And my sole purpose in life is to just go explore and experience and like maximize my joy at just immersing myself in all of that nature and all the magical things to eat and drink and just smell and see and taste. Like that's what that life was like.
Yeah, so when I think of a flying squirrel, I think of, like a dichotomy of erratic and very well-intentioned, smooth, gliding, like you said. How does that background influence your life as a creative now?
Wow, it's such a good question. I would say on the funnest level of that, flying squirrels are like portal jumpers because in order to get from like this tree to that tree that's like 200 feet away, like you've really got to be like in a big state of trust and like willingness to embrace the unknown and to just like lean into your fear and trust yourself that you're going to do something impossible like on a regular basis. And so as a creative, that's like where I like to be. And I also like to remind myself and like the people that come along for the ride with me that like, that's the fun part, and that like fear is just part of the journey.
Amen.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I think that is actually a good point. Like that I think a lot of people either don't think about or intentionally don't think about. Where like a lot of what, like at least as a musician, producer, like a lot of your decisions and like your day-to-day is kind of a balance between fearing other people won't like enjoy what you create and like just for yourself also just enjoying the creation about it. So it's this weird like struggle with like trying to be confident enough to push that fear part just like aside, but everyone would be lying if they said they didn't have those thoughts. And it's like such a huge part of what you do as a musician or a creative in general. Like you're gonna have to deal with that at some point. And so I guess that would be a good question to ask you. How do you so confidently, I mean, obviously, besides the fact that it's in your DNA, push that fear aside and create from the right place without that?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't always do the best job, but I, like to give myself humility and grace, and also perhaps with even more generosity, extend that to others that I create with and share life with. And but at the heart of it, I like to, they say keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I don't necessarily think of fear as my enemy, but I think as a good, turn of tongue. I like to keep my finger on the pulse with fear and just keep myself open to that conversation, such that like when I feel fear in the space, I like to name it. I like to see if it has anything to say to me. And usually what it says is, are you sure, or go for it? And so I like to just, take that affirmation and, like maybe give myself an opportunity to drop in, take a few breaths, maybe feel some things that I haven't felt that maybe I need to feel because there's some good information there. And then I think a lot of times that then that reminder to feel, to breathe, like brings me back into the present moment and adds fuel to my like creative fire in the moment.
Yeah, it's so, God, I love how you put that, because it's true. It is cathartic to face something like that and getting in the habit of realizing it's happening, stepping back and going, okay, like what is this actually, why is this bubbling up? Like, what is this trying to tell me? Like you said, and then just handling it. Then it's so beautiful and so powerful. Like even just earlier today, I was in one of those states where I was like, questioning or, I guess fearful would be a strong word for the state that I was in today, but like definitely in one of those moods where, a little bit more unsure, and I didn't resolve it. And I didn't feel better about that in that moment. And like hearing this alone, like really emphasizes the fact that you have the power at any given time to like understand what's happening to you and observe it and get yourself out of it, which I think even just knowing that at any given time is powerful, even if you don't act on it. But acting on it, obviously, as you said, would be preferred.
Yeah, like it hit me that like fear is a reaction to something. So fear is information about who I am today in this situation. If I'm feeling fear for something, it's telling me something about myself and how I'm showing up to this moment. So instead of like running from the fear or trying to ignore the fear or bury the fear under a, avalanche of alcohol or something like that, then what about naming it, asking it what it's doing here, spending some time with it, be like, okay, what part of me is this that is afraid? Where did this fear come from? Is this like a natural, deep-seated evolutionary thing? Like I saw a tiger, I shit myself and I ran away through the woods. It's a pretty important part of fear. Like, thanks, fear, for making me not think about, do I need to run from this tiger? Or is it like I had to stand up and speak in front of somebody? No actual tiger mauling possible today, but
I mean,
the possibility of shitting myself and running away is still there, right? I don't know how they do things in Canada, man, but they keep the tigers in cages down here in the USA, man.
Usually.
I mean, I'm just saying, you got to be prepared at any moment. You never know. Life's unpredictable. But one thing that's interesting too, if you can learn to accept that feeling and not let it choke you up or, get the best of you. One thing that's really interesting about fear when you think about it is, I mean, what happens? Your heart rate goes up, you get like hyper intensely focused, and it's all stuff that's actually beneficial for putting you through a new situation if you can harness that kind of emotion. I mean, biologically, it's like life or death, right? But we don't live in that anymore. So, I mean, regardless, if you have the elevated heart rate and the hyper focused mental state and vision and all that stuff, it can be a really beneficial tool for just like priming you to be in a accepting state to go through a new situation. Much like how we've been walking our whole lives and we don't think about it. It becomes just this kind of autopilot kind of movement. When you're trying something new, when you're exposing yourself to a new situation, it's a foreign thing. It's the complete opposite of autopilot. It's fire on all gears and be hyper alert and absorb all the information I can out of this. And yeah, part of that can be overwhelming, but it's also a very open state. And yeah, if you're able to relax into that, it can be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. I wish someone would tell me all this stuff like every Monday at like 8 a.m. So
we're recording this, right?
No, I know. That's literally my first thought. I had that thought, and then I was like, but then you could just listen to this episode every week. But
and you're going to be someone.
Yeah, run this episode up, humans.
Exactly. But ultimately, my thinking box up here went full circle to bringing that up as a segue into the fact that like, I think everyone, like in a conversation that, is open-minded, accepting of change, willing to listen to how to solve their problem. Some people don't want you to give them a solution. They just want you to commiserate. But if you wanted to fix it, if you wanted to learn the tools to like accept fear, name it, understand why it's there and solve it, I think that the real struggle for most people is actually observing the fact that that's happening real time, right? Like, I think that that's probably for anyone listening, the biggest factor that limits that growth. So what would you say are some good ways that you found to nurture that ability to realize that it's happening in real time and have the humility to be like, okay, hold on, pause. Let's go over this. What is this trying to tell me and solving it then?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That is like, I think at the heart of it, it's just like daily rituals in the moment, and like forming a relationship with my breath and being curious about like even noticing if I'm breathing in a moment. Am I holding my breath? I was just literally holding my breath as I was listening to you, and then being willing to soften, like being interested in like, what does my heart feel like right now when, and maybe like, as I'm listening, in this conversation, just even naming it right now, I can say, oh, and maybe somebody who's listening to this could go, oh, what does my heart feel like right now? Because I can simultaneously listen or speak and feel that and be just interested even in feeling the sensations. And like the first thing that wants to happen is the mind wants to go, oh, I want to label that. I want to name it. I want to judge it. I want to like, give it words. But we could just bypass all of that and just feel and just be in a sensation. And then like that combination of breath and sensation and observation and witnessing, that is all a doorway into just like being with what's there. And I think there's a lot of courage available in the moment, which is, I think, it's been said at least once before that courage is like what happens when we decide to move forward with our fear instead of to let it hold us back.
Totally. That's a fantastic saying. You sound like someone that is probably well-versed in meditation. Am I correct?
Yeah, totally. I love meditation. I meditate on a daily basis, and I lead meditation classes and workshops at my house and other places.
how from like at what point did you get into meditation? And for a lot of people that might have tried it a few times, or realized too late when it's like, oh man, I really need to meditate. I'm talking to myself here. Like every time that I'm like, why is your brain so foggy? You're like, oh right, because you haven't given any space to clear it out and like solve this. How, like what kind of routines or like even just meditation practices did you find really got you interested, or like helped you create the habit of doing that?
That's a good question. I'll answer this in two ways. One is putting myself up to things in my life that felt big and maybe bigger than what I knew that I thought I could accomplish, and doing them anyways, was creating very ripe soil, fertile soil for requiring and needing meditation, because then I would often find myself overwhelmed and emotional because I was really putting myself out there. So then meditation really became a necessity. And then the second question about practices, I think a really easy practice that has worked for me and that I come back to after, having been meditating for about 20 years is just just coming back and witnessing the breath. And a thing that I like to play with is just imagine that the breath is breathing me instead of trying to control the breath. And so just noticing the breath as it has its own natural rhythm entering and leaving the body. And maybe to focus even further is just to pick one place, like the nostrils, and to notice the sensation of the breath entering and leaving the body, and just being curious about what happens if I don't control this. Will I stop breathing? Will I die right here? Will I hyperventilate? Who knows? And to just be that witness. And it can even be a little bit fun.
I mean,
Super
I've been to your
cool.
breathworks. They're even deeper than fun. They're transformative.
They can be.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about the kind of workshops you do and the kind of work that you help guide other people through.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. I would say I do monthly breath work, and I'm curious if y'all have done breath work before.
Like Wim Hof breathing, guided or various types of meditation. But that's about the extent of it.
Okay,
For me.
cool.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Basically, if basically, I don't want to say your standard meditation, but like most meditation practices that you'll get on an app like Calm or whatever, like that will direct you to focusing on your breathing. And if that's in the ballpark of the breath control you're talking about, then yes, but not. Yeah.
If
limited.
you mean YouTube guided meditation 20 minutes, then yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you may be talking to some meditation heathens here. You're gonna have to pardon us.
Oh man,
Yeah, I've breathed once or twice before.
Yeah, well, that's the beautiful thing. Then, and I would say almost every one of my breathwork workshops, what I like to talk about is that breath is the thing that we all share in common. We all started this journey as humans with one breath. It all starts that way when we come out of our mother's womb, and you have that one breath that makes or breaks everything. And then when we leave and we go to whatever happens next when we die, the last thing we do is we breathe. And so the breath is this guide that's with us. And when you go through difficult times in your life, what brings you back? The breath. When you need to find courage, what brings you back? The breath. So in the breathwork journeys that I guide, what we're really doing is we're just carving out some time to bring some curiosity and maybe even find some sacredness with the breath. And then just doing a very simple breathing practice that anyone could do. That's just breathing into the belly, breathing into the chest and out. And then we just repeat that over and over, and we do that in rounds. And what can happen is either you just get really relaxed and really calm, and that can be nice, And then you can also just completely blast off and melt into the fabric of the universe and have a completely psychedelic experience, and experience overwhelming, in a good way, feelings of love and gratitude and like awe at the magic and the mystery of being alive. So I think that kind of is the heart of what we're doing with the breath work.
Yeah, I've also been witness to many emotional releases of pretty much every type of emotion that I can think of. I've heard come out, and I think a really important part of the breath work, we were talking about it before, is the container that you hold and the intentions that you set at the beginning, because they will, give people like the permission and the safety to allow that to happen, which is something that, if you need to scream and you're like in the grocery store, you're like, yeah, probably shouldn't. Maybe this isn't the time or place. But if you're in a container where it's been like, given to you, like, hey, like you need to scream or laugh or cry or giggle or whatever, go for it. Make the noise.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, there's kind of like a shift in conversation that I like to invite into those spaces, and also all of that permission in how we like craft and speak into existence the kind of experience that we're going to have together. And that's to like really invite in a sharing circle in a space where we're really just speaking for ourselves and our own experience, and like radically owning the experience and the feelings that we have, and trusting that the people and the facilitation is going to allow that, like, we can speak freely and have that all be met with respect and like reverence for like the sovereignty of the individual experience. And that, say, a lot of people, I find myself even, choose not to speak up when we're like really when I'm going through something profound, because if I don't know whether somebody's going to try and give me advice, or if somebody's going to try and like hijack my share and then start talking about themselves when I'm like trying to like really bring something out that's got some depth and like meaning to my soul, like I might choose to hold that back in. So we really create that space so that people know that they're going to be seen, they're going to be held, they're going to be heard, and that they're going to be treated with a good way.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you, not to hijack the conversation, but I feel like you guys might have an interesting take on this, and it's a conversation I was having recently with a friend about, I feel like there's a lot we've figured out in the Western world with traditional science, but there's still so much that we don't know about the body. And I just kind of have some like fragmented thoughts, but when it comes to breath work, for example, something I've heard Wim Hof talk about is like oxygenating the blood and making it more alkaline instead of acidic, and the ability for that to fight like certain diseases in your body, which made me think of something else I read, heard, researched somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but I think it was... I don't even, whatever, I don't remember, but something about like the iron in our blood, the way that it circulates through our blood, creating some kind of like magnetic field, subtle magnetic field that could be interpreted as like the aura of the body. And I found that idea to be very interesting, because definitely after doing some intentional breathing and, oxygenating your blood, as he would call it, you definitely do feel like more relaxed, more calm, just in a very different, focused, kind of primal mind state. And it just kind of makes me think about the validity of those ideas and how you can kind of feel somebody's energy. If somebody's very jittery and nervous, they're probably not breathing fully, and you can kind of feel that off their body, body language aside. And so I'm wondering, how much deeper does this topic go? Does any of that resonate with you? Do you feel like there's any validity with that? Do you have your own thoughts on kind of how breath work affects your body on a deeper level?
Yeah, for sure. So, I feel that while the thing you brought up about the iron in the blood, I had not heard that before, but I feel like a lot of resonance with that idea. But I think to bring it to, that like broader level that you're talking about of like the transfer of energy and being in a state of increased or primal sensitivity. Like as a facilitator, and also somebody who's done a lot of breath work, I find that both inside and out of the journey, there's a lot of that. So like when I'm in the journeying space, I am feeling things, and a lot of times I'll be feeling things that later when we share about our experience, I'll have been feeling emotions and maybe even seeing things that are happening in somebody else's experience or somebody else's life. So there's this very pliable psychic space happening there, which I think is pretty fascinating. But then also as a facilitator, I go around and I let everyone know that I may spend a little time with each person, maybe like put my hands on them in a healing way as like a hands-on healer. And so what I hear time and time again is that, well, I'm just following the flow in that space and going where I feel guided, and I'm not thinking about why. I just, when I go and put my hands on somebody, people multiple times through each ceremony that I do will say, you came to me at just the right time. I was like calling out or asking for you to come and put your hands on me because I needed something, and you were right there, right when I needed you. And I think that what you said, Tesko, just like perfectly explains that phenomenon. And the oxygenation of the blood, like I have gotten less sick less often since I made breathwork a regular part of my practice. And then I also have become increasingly, and in a very good way, in a grounded way, much more energetically or psychically aware of other people. And I think that has positively benefited my relationships for being like more considerate and able to empathically make space for other people to show up with whatever they're showing up with on a given day. And I found that to be very, very beneficial and valuable in all my relationships.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Tesko, to speak to your point from someone less qualified, but someone who has done some significant pondering on this.
Done some breathing yourself?
Well, obviously breathing is the starting point for your question, but like the human body only has limited senses, right? Where what our perceptions are able to pick up is limited to our physical form, right? And there are a lot of other things happening in the world that we don't have developed sense for. Magnetism being a perfect example, electricity, all forms of waves from light to sound. I mean, obviously sound is picked up by ears in a limited range, but there's a lot of waves outside that hearing range, as well as like gravity as well. Like these are all things that like we can't really perceive, but like obviously have an effect on us. And they've done studies where it has been proven that if someone all the way across the world is thinking thoughts of like love and like basically like thinking of one person in particular, and they're thinking thoughts of love and like togetherness with that person's brain in like an MRI or whatever picks up the actual brain waves lights up in a specific area that is like corresponding to that like specific like the fact that you can measure a response of someone all the way across the world just from thinking about them is enough proof that there is all sorts of phenomenon happening that we aren't, perceiving in our conscious mind. And it just leads to prove that like it is plausible that there are things like an aura related to a magnetic field. I don't know if it's related directly to the iron in your blood, but very possible. Magnetic field, or even so much as like, everything with mass has gravity, right? And your ability to consciously control that is zero, or maybe so small, but it does have an effect, right? And all these things like, I think are not necessarily worthy of spending your life trying to figure out, because just because you don't have the senses to figure it out, you probably won't have a deep understanding of it, but something to keep in mind that there's things at play that you can't perceive.
Yeah. One thing too, while we're on the topic that I think of is when people smoke cigarettes, for example, and they quit, and they talk about one of the biggest benefits is like within the first day, your body's able to like flush CO2, which sticks to your blood cells, has a higher affinity than oxygen, basically, to stick to your blood cells. It makes me think of, if the benefit is more oxygen in your blood, right? Like my bro science tells me that if we push that further and you actually intentfully oxygenate your body, shouldn't it have even more benefits, And yeah, that's really interesting what you say about the area in your brain lighting up. I definitely have to look more into that. But I'm sure all of you can relate with the first time you feel that like interconnectedness of like consciousness, and you realize that we're from the same consciousness, just being expressed through different bodies. It's a really, really crazy feeling, and it makes me wonder. I don't know. There's so many ways to take this topic, but it makes me think of another conversation I had with the boss of my old job. I became really close friends with him, and he was really, really smart when it came to physics. And we were talking about, ways that the speed of light can be broken, and or information can be transferred at faster than the speed of light. And it makes me think, maybe there is some kind of interconnectedness here.
Wait, how does information get transferred faster than the speed of light?
Well, there's theoretically it can be.
Hey Tesko, I'm gonna back you up on this one.
Yes.
Yes,
yeah. Please. There's so many ways I could take this, but I don't want to just word jumble everything.
It's called the Entanglement Principle, and
yes, that was yes.
Yeah, it's essentially saying that that if you like express it through string theory, that there is an interconnectedness of that you can make transfer of information through like sound, light, frequency, but you can also through non-locality and the entanglement principle. It's instantaneous knowing, instantaneous awareness, and it's like that instantaneous feeling that you're talking about that's showing up on the brain scans. Like that is literally that.
Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense. I mean if a brainwave is a shorter wavelength than light, or at a higher frequency, that it could travel faster. That's very cool. This is a science podcast, so we had to get to the
this is science.
100%
human science podcast.
No sources cited.
No sources needed.
Kind of reminds me of that. I was gifted the book. I'm slipping on the author's name and the name of the book, so
that was helpful.
No sources cited, but it's the one where they did experiments with like thinking different thoughts at water molecules and then freezing them and photographing the different compositions of the way the water molecules froze. And it is stark, the difference that like positive and hopeful and happy thoughts and gratitude and love look compared to like thoughts of despair and depression and hopelessness and anger. Like they're extremely different looking water molecules. And we're, what's that, 70, 75, 80% water, something like that, depending on how hydrated we are, maybe.
But if something sorry.
I was going to say, if we can think a thought at a water molecule and change the way it freezes, and somebody across the world can think about us and change the way our brain lights up, like, the power of your thoughts, of your words, is then like literal magic. Like it's actually something that, magic is a technology that you can't explain, right? Like we don't know how to talk about it fully yet, but there's these theories and these ideas that are starting to like put two and two together, and it's really cool to see that and kind of see the confirmation of like, oh yeah, it does just feel better to think good thoughts, and here's some science that might point at why.
One thing I'm just gonna, another kind of word vomit, and I'm very curious to hear
I'll get you towel.
Your guys' thoughts on it. Is two kind of ideas, separate thoughts that I sometimes contemplate the interconnectedness, and so any input is very welcome. But one thing I think about, being in the tech world, for example, when you code, there is the code, which is just a bunch of letters and blah, 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 and logic and everything behind the scenes, in various files and blah, blah, blah. But what the user actually sees is some kind of visual representation or interactable kind of application that they can engage with, right? Now that makes me think of, and again, this is just kind of late night stuff that you go on rabbit holes and read about, but there was some kind of like ancient civilization or tribe or blah, something like that believed that our journey through this life basically is to like return to the God source, and that duality is a very prevalent theme in humanity, and the idea is that the God energy is this accumulated mass of positive energy, and basically we are like cast out from the source, and it has a pull that tries to bring us back, but if we stray too far from the pull, we can get sucked into the mass of the yang to the yin, essentially the bad energy. And it kind of makes me think about the same way computers can take a whole bunch of essentially binary code that has this representation. It makes me think of all the times duality has been expressed through existence, and what if this is just some kind of combination of good and bad energies, much like zeros and ones, and this is the visual representation of that. Of course, it's much deeper than just being a visual representation, but the same way code at its most atomic form is just zeros and ones. I mean, I don't know. And my brain is like, yep, that bro science makes sense. Why couldn't life just be good energies, bad energies? The same way you can feed this energy into a water molecule and see the effect of that when it crystallizes into a snowflake, for example. It will be very symmetrical and beautiful when you feed it good energy, and it'll be deformed and asymmetrical when you feed it bad energy. That has no coherent conclusion, but if anyone is inspired by my random word ramblings or any of that resonated, feel free to chime in.
I mean, I think that's a beautiful idea, to think that, like, just in the same way, like the order of trillions and quadrillions and unimaginable digit counts of ones and zeros add up to even just the software that we're recording this podcast on. Just like that, is the representation of those ones and zeros, that your representation of anything in life is just a similar digit count that's unfathomable of like positive and negative interactions, and that can be baked into your code from your upbringing or your disposition at any given time. But it's like a combination of all those ones and zeros of good and evil adding up. I can buy into that. I like that.
It kind of half makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Well, I got something on this. Like very much from direct experience. In the breathwork space, I often have a very like all sensory experience where I like see, feel, hear, taste, touch, that like that you're talking about, that God source energy. And I feel it and I see it, like literally like becoming this like larger pulse of like light, sound, color, frequency, and vibration, that like the deeper I get in with the breath, then the more like prevalent that is in my experience. And and then like when I've gone really deep, then I'll actually see like the code streaming off of that like that source energy, and as like I'm like able to actually be with that, then like I feel myself being like rewritten, returned back to that original state, back to that original source. And I very much do feel that sense of like, you know, I go off on these, you know, these very human journeys, and you know, before I really found like my resonance with that energy, I would kind of get mixed up in, like you put it, the you know, the negative energy or like the bad energy, and I found it very like cathartic to like have a place to come back to, like, you know, the watering hole, to be able to refresh myself and remind myself of like if there is an original source code for me, that I can like always come back to that. And you know, the way that you describe that is like very literally the way that I've like seen it, felt it, experienced it. So it like, yeah, it's like inspiring and touching to hear the way that you're describing it, just kind of like, you know, late night bro science tinkering thoughts. It's like I think we're coming to the same place through different methods.
Cool. I'm really happy to hear that resonated.
Kind of reminds me of that duck sauce video again. The Fermi paradox and the simulation theory.
That is beautiful though. Like
video. Show it to you later.
Okay.
in the same way that the goal of any good coder is to get the same result with less lines of code, you know, it's plausible that us humans are operating in the same fashion, and all of the negative energy that we harbor in our code is inefficient code. And if you can dump as much of that negative energy somewhere else so you can get your code in less lines to do the same things, you'll become a more proficient version of yourself, more like what you would want. That's also interesting.
Yeah, one thing to kind of just piggyback off that while we're on it, you know, is working at companies who have been around for a while and have like large code bases. One thing that's very common in the tech world is technical debt, which basically is just the accumulation of little inefficiencies that build up over time and then need to be compensated for, or totally like refactor large chunks of code to make it more operatable. Kind of makes me think of the development of civilization. And we can come up with like medicines, but then you get biological warfare. You can come up with, I don't know, various stuff. You can genetically modify food, but then that can go too far. It's like everything kind of comes with this technical debt, if you will. The further we advance and the more features we're able to implement to human existence, the more technical debt we accumulate as well. And now we're seeing this, you know, very weird situation with Russia and Ukraine, where it's like people are scared to interfere because now we have nuclear stuff. And it's like the further we progress, the bigger the problems become as well. And it just makes me wonder, you know, if it feels though like it is a part of humanity, much like, you know, we're put on this earth and we have to learn to deal with vices and bad habits and certain stuff like that. And, you know, fuck up a couple times before we realize like the true way to live is to avoid certain things, to abstain from certain stuff, to, you know, turn your energy to your breath. Like really a lot of the stuff that you need is really simple kind of stuff, but on our search for more, much like software is more functionality, needs to do this more efficiently, this, that, you kind of accumulate this debt. You see sides of the shadow self that you can't put back in that box once it's out. So, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of parallels, and it also makes
there's too many. It's uncanny. There's actually, the more we talk about it, the more these parallels are like.
I really don't want to hijack this conversation, but it also makes me think of like biblical stories where I find religions fascinating. I think it's humanity's attempt to consolidate this kind of raw information over multiple generations, and there's countless stories of people thinking they're better than God, whatever that means to you, and going off on their own because they think now I have the knowledge and I know better and I can fend for myself. And every story ends with essentially God wiping the earth clean or destroying it and starting new. And then people follow. And then after a while they stray and they go their own way. And to me, I'm like, that seems like technology. Like technology seems like that is our way of saying, I know better and I'm going to go my way and do this until inevitable destruction. Sorry to get heavy, but
and each operating system is its own religion. So since we have someone that is incredibly deep into breath work in general, you mentioned Wim Hof earlier, Tesko, and it's someone that I've found fascinating, his teachings on the breath, and although I've fallen off on trying to implement them as regularly, I would love to ask you, Spencer, what are your thoughts on Wim Hof's concepts for, how like oxygenating the blood and its benefits? Like, where do you find a place for that in your breathing habits, if any, and just in general? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's super valid, and the way that shows up in the way that I like to practice breathwork best is we like to do a combination of cacao ceremony and breathwork ceremony. And what I really mean by ceremony is just bringing an element of ritual and sacredness to how we do both of those things, like we talked about earlier. But specific to cacao, a little known fact about cacao that I only recently learned a couple years ago when I started doing breathwork on a more regular basis with people that are connected to these lineages and practices is that cacao is not just for chocolate, and that cacao is a really potent medicine on a very physiological level. It will cause a vasodilation, which means that your capillaries and blood vessels and all of the structures of the circulatory system, such as the heart, will all expand, and they are then receptive to more oxygen. And so when we combine a cacao and breath ceremony, what we're then doing is we're doubling, tripling, I don't know what the number is, but we're adding some factor of like, let's turn this oxygenation level up as high as we can in a good way, such that then that increased oxygenation is going to give us more access to visionary and mystical states. And so then the other thing that I think is maybe not exactly what you were asking, Evan, but is like also I think fascinating is that like, these medicines, breath, cacao, and then other, psychedelics, but I don't tend to combine those with breath work, that they exist in other dimensions other than just, this like physical plane, like this third dimensional space where it's like, up, down, physical matter, etc. But that like these, like cacao, it is like an intelligence that exists in other, like layers of consciousness. And so then as we physically open ourselves up, we open up the circulatory system and open ourselves up to more oxygen. We are also simultaneously opening ourselves up to more energy, more sound, more frequency, more vibration. And so, in this conversation that, is like attracted a lot of people that are into music and music production, this is something I think is just fascinating, because one of my favorite things to do with this combination of breathwork and cacao is to either create or handpick music that is then going to steer and guide this consciousness expression that we're going to go on as a journey, and to create these shamanic hero journeys for people that can be very transformative. And so, to make this maybe a little more relatable, like when I first heard Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, that changed me. That album is a shamanic journey in its own right, of going from one place to another and like seeing the world in a new way. And and it's so magical to me that with these very simple technologies, and I'm talking about breath as a technology, sound as a technology, we can find healing, we can find growth, we can find creative evolution. So I feel like maybe that wasn't the answer you were necessarily looking for, but that's kind of my response of.
Well, but it is though, because you very plainly supported the fact that more oxygen in the blood is a good thing for many states. And I also forgot to preface, if anyone listening to this hasn't heard of Wim Hof, he's basically a guy that has developed a technique for breathing, not like hyperventilating, but breathing a lot of oxygen into your system in a short period of time, so that you oxygenate the blood, and it has like a bunch of like really crazy interesting effects. But if you haven't heard of him, look it up if you're interested on this topic of breathing, because he is like a superhuman from this stuff, like climbed Everest barefoot in shorts with no added oxygen, and he was fine. Like, imagine doing that.
Yeah, or like
incredible.
Sounds
submerging under super ice cold water for very long times, minutes on end, many minutes.
Right. And even as a completely lay person, just normal guy, I've even tried it, like literally doing a Wim Hof exercise, jumping into a river that was like absolutely freezing cold, like 20 minutes ago, and feeling warm in that river. Like, it literally works. But okay, so Wim Hof, good stuff. Learn about it. Oxygen in your blood, good thing. Another thing that you have kind of touched on and mentioned a lot is like a curiosity for your breath, a curiosity for a sensation in your body. That's something that I've actually, a term that I've, you hear used a lot in these types of spaces and practices. Can you touch on a little bit of how to cultivate that curiosity for your own sense, and how that helps, like, just generally understand your own workings in your body a little bit better?
Yeah. So the way that I like to interact with that is I like to engage with all of the feelings that I have, with the possibility that maybe they're alive. And so what I find, as we just touched on earlier, but we can do again, is like, if I just tune into my body, I close my eyes and I'm like, okay, like, what part of my body is drawing my attention? In this moment, it's my left hand. That's interesting. I'm going to be curious about that. And so now I'm just breathing and feeling my left hand, and I'm like, I wonder what I feel there. And as I feel into that, I go, well, what does it feel like? It feels kind of warm. It feels kind of like fuzzy, maybe. Well, that's curious. I wonder why it feels like that. And just by being not attached and giving a little bit of space, then that curiosity can blossom into it's like one step in front of the next. What happens next? What happens next? And where that has led me is sometimes I find really interesting things, like maybe if I'm in an intimate conversation with somebody, I'll maybe share a little feeling that I'm having, and then that person goes, oh yeah, I feel that too. And then they say, what that reminds me of is when my grandmother told me da 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 da. And then now we're in connection, and I'm like, oh, I really needed to hear that just now, because I've been struggling with feelings of such and such and such, and now that you've told me that, I feel a lot more open to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that the curiosity about the present moment leads to presence in the present moment, which kind of creates its own flow state and sets the stage for those types of connections and synchronicities and serendipities that are just the coolest shit in life.
Yes. Yeah, straight up.
Yeah. That really, what you just said, Luke, gets to the heart of the entire reason I even brought it up, because I have noticed, even from a very untrained, meditation perspective, that curiosity not only makes a meditation or a breathing more fun, but also, like you said, like, you're way more present in that feeling if you are able to guide off a principle like curiosity, and it instills the right frame of mind for you to, like, keep yourself like willingly, and like you want to explore the curiosity of like, you know, those sensations that like help you improve that, rather than like, I need to meditate, sit down 10 minutes, focus on your breathing, 1 2 3 4 5, work thing, oh god damn it, start again, 1 2 3 4, like that. You can force yourself to get there, but like doing it like that doesn't cultivate the right approach, in my opinion. So I appreciate what you said.
Curiosity for the present. That really stuck with me.
Yeah, some people seem to use like meditation as a good excuse to just practice the negative self-talk and like self-punishment and judgment. That fuck, we were doing that all day anyways. Like why set aside 20 minutes? You could have just done that in the car ride home or whatever. But like the people who make me want to meditate when they talk about it more like this, like having the curiosity, the attention on your attention, noticing what thoughts do come up and allowing them to float away instead of being like, fuck, no thoughts were supposed to happen. No thought zone.
Yeah, exactly. And also for the purposes of you know, a podcast that's normally centered on music, cultivating that mind, your framework for your mind to be curious is essential to creating interesting, captivating music, right? Like having that, where does this go? Let's follow this thread, like, and being open-minded about where it goes, rather than being like, my curiosity ends here because it didn't end in the result that I had in my head before. No more curiosity down this road. Next. Like, you know, actually like being able to follow that thread all the way to fruition is very meditative in and of itself. But yeah, what were you going to say, Nicola?
On that note, I'm just curious, Spencer, to hear about how you bring that approach to creativity. What does creativity mean to you, and how do you cultivate that curiosity to express that through your art?
Yeah, so I really found my flow with that for the first time when I was making a lot of kombucha, which I still do. And
Squirrel pop kombucha.
Yeah, it's nuts, right?
It's nuts.
And so I was like making a lot of squirrel pop, and I like would get, just like you were saying, Evan, I was like, be like, okay, I'm gonna make root beer kombucha, and it has to be root beer. And then like, man, I screwed that up so many times trying to make root beer. But I took a very Bob Ross approach, which is like, okay, we're like, you know, whoops, there's a black lion. Hey, we're making happy trees right here.
Amen. Happy accidents. No mistakes.
Yeah, always. Yeah. And so I made a lot of happy accidents, and always gave myself the grace to like roll with it and go, well, isn't that interesting? Well, what wants to happen next? And I think, you know, on a personal level, that was very cathartic for me, because, you know, I think like the men in my lineage have like been like gradually softening up, but said another way, have like also like been like, you know, pretty hard on each other. And so to like, you know, find these creative practices, it's like brought me to find a lot of grace within myself, and then also, you know, be able to create joy out of parts of my life where maybe I found that I was like having a hard time having fun. And so to bring it back to kombucha, like just letting myself make a lot of mistakes, and then being rewarded by like new flavors that came out of that I never would have dreamed up, never would have expected. And then to have somebody say, wow, this is my favorite flavor off of something that I literally couldn't have come up with myself. It's humbling. It's like goofy. It's fun. And I think it's like, it's just a good thing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Like what that last bit reminded me of is the the song that Sarah and Derek and I wrote, Coming Soon, Humans.
I love that song so much.
Right? And it's my favorite song that I've been a part of in a long time. It's everybody I showed it to recently's favorite song of mine. And it was mostly just freestyle, serendipity, accidental.
ooh, like just, run it a few times and hey, I'll take this chunk and let's arrange it. And then I'll freestyle and then you freestyle. And then, oh shit, we have a song. And if we had set out to make it, it wouldn't have happened. But we just set out and found it and it happened. And like you said, it's humbling and it's fun and it's goofy and we didn't take it too seriously or have this idea what it was supposed to be. We just allowed it. And that allowing, that presence was what got us there.
You know, as a kid, I was really excited by the idea that something new could be discovered in life, and then I started to get jaded as I got a little older because I started to form this belief oh, everything's already been discovered, it's all been created. I was, as a kid, I was into dinosaurs, and I was like, oh, we already know about the dinosaurs. Check, moving on. And in creativity, I find this infinite well of oh, there is always something to be discovered, there's always something to be created, there's always something to be delighted by. And every music producer who's ever touched my heart and soul and gotten me to dance in a good way is on that pulse. And what a fucking gift.
Yeah. And in a while here, I'm actually going to go debut that song I was talking about.
Oh, what?
At an event.
Oh,
yeah,
what?
We're going to play it. We're going to play it at Ohm Culture tonight.
God.
So if you're listening to this as a podcast, this shit already happened. You missed it. Don't worry about it. Come to the next one. But it's going to be a very fun event. And that is my segue to talk about. Spencer does a lot of cool events. And I want to talk about that before we get out of here. Both the events themselves and the putting on of community events that get people together, because I know that is something that our audience would be very interested in.
Yeah, so I think as far as the communities that I collaborate with and the events that I like to put on, we do anywhere from short experiences like we've been talking about, these 3-hour breathworks, meditation, sound healings, or collaborative family dinners where we're talking about abundance and money and circulating that creative energy in our communities. But then we also like to do things a little bigger. We recently did the Lunar Bloom Gathering that Luke Rain was one of our ecstatic dance DJs at. And, so we spent an entire day together, going deep on some of these practices that bring us into our presence and our conscious, our expanded state of consciousness, while also just being silly and goofy and having a good time, getting out into nature. I think there's a lot of fun to be had. And also just, I'm about cultivating this lifestyle where we have things that we can show up for that help keep those creative juices flowing, and to do that in community, because it can get kind of lonely as a creative sometime, in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other events that are coming up that I'm really excited about,
Me
that
too.
Luke is also going to be at, is APOG. And if I recall correctly, you played at APOG last year, Evan. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is why I know it
So much
exists, and how I met Jared.
Yes.
And then ran into you.
Yes.
Shortly after we had met
At the
in a
Emerald
yurt.
Grove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Synchronicity again.
And
Appreciate
then,
you.
the other
Absolutely.
event that I want
Appreciate you,
to,
man.
So much appreciation.
well, the other event that I want to highlight is Samadhi Summer. That's that's a 3-day journey that we go on, that is created by the Liberated Hearts community, and that I collaborate very closely with Jared and Natalie. For those of you who haven't met them, look them up. They're amazing. And Samadhi Summer is it's like the 3-day version of, I think, what I'm describing in the Lunar Bloom Gathering, but just with if we do the thing right, 90 people out in nature, and expanding our consciousness, and opening our hearts, and coming together to make room for more love in our lives, more play in our lives, more silliness in our lives, and maybe to grow a little bit along the way to be a little better version of ourselves. But I'm gonna pause. I feel like I just kind of word vomited a lot.
Hey, I'm really excited for these events. If anybody's interested in coming, I think APOG is sold out.
Yeah, APOG sold out in 3
folks,
hours.
you missed your chance. Come next year, though. I think they're going to find a bigger venue next year.
We're working on
Evan knows. We actually did a whole podcast about small festivals, talking about how cool any patch of grass was. But we also got Samadhi Summer coming up, which I'm super excited for. I get to spin some DJ sets there, and a bunch of my friends are doing workshops and playing music, and it's going to be amazing. And tell them when that's going to be.
So that's July 15th through 18th out in Darrington,
Washington. If anybody wants to come out, holler.
If anyone dares.
Yeah. Dares to go to the Ington. Yeah. Cheap puns forever will get me. Yeah. And then just to close it out, like, what's it like putting on these events? Like, is there any like advice that pops up in your mind of like, definitely do this, or definitely don't do that?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a shit show, right? That's why.
Yeah, definitely.
Laughing.
Definitely don't do this, period. If you want to maintain your sanity, but if you're willing to let your sanity go,
cheers.
Then do it with your best friends. Do it to have a really great time and bring people together, rather than doing it to try to make money. If you do a good job, eventually the money may come. But I'll tell you right now, nobody who's in the events industry and is making people a lot of joy and happiness started doing it for the money. That is not why you do it. And do it with people you trust, that you like, you're interested and curious to know them through and through and know their heart and soul, because you will get to know that.
Amen. That's some good ass advice, I think.
And then I would say one last thing, and I'm honestly giving myself this advice as I say it to y'all, is just like make it your goal to show up and have a lot of fun, and like how could I have even more fun doing this? Because there's a lot of things to be responsible. There's a lot of moving parts, and if you get yourself bogged out in that and get stressed out, then what you're going to find is everyone else is having a great time except you, and that is no way to run an event. So just always keep your eye on that North Star of how can I have even more fun doing this?
Yeah.
I like that mantra as well
Go for it.
even just for making music. It's a fantastic mantra. How can I make this more fun? Follow that brave curiosity.
Yeah. That's something I've had to re-up on lately. A couple episodes ago was our episode about burnout. And so I told my burnout story from last year. Oh, it's on the internet still, so you got it. But the cool thing was, as soon as I burnt out, I decided to make this clearing in my life and let a lot go that was stressing me out, and put pause on a lot of stuff that was stressing me out. And the clearing directly led to me knowing you, because I then had time to go to this event where I met some people that brought me to the place to go to the event at the place you now live. And then go to the place where I'm DJing the show tonight for the first time that same week, and DJ another event that same week back at that place you live. And it's just like whirlwinded into everything cool that's happened in the last 10, 11 months in my life. So, sometimes that crazy burnout, or like you said earlier, kind of like how the crazy stress that you got yourself in of picking bigger and bigger projects to be a part of led you to seek out meditation, which led you to breath work. And then you're like, oh man, if I hadn't stressed the shit out of myself, I wouldn't be here in this cool place teaching people how to recover from stressing the shit out of themselves. So it's all part of the happy little accidents. Shouts to Bob
true.
Ross.
I mean,
And
burnout is a
pop that was.
Burnout is a sprint without taking a second to catch your breath. You can't sprint indefinitely. And that I feel like the fact that you need to stop and breathe after a sprint both relates to breath work and burnout and this conversation as a whole.
Yeah.
Great analogy.
Wow. Tied a bow on it there, fellas.
I do.
Well,
So
I don't know if
beautiful.
we could wrap it up any better.
I think the last way to do it is tell them how to find you on the internets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the best way is just Instagram, Creative Living and Friends. And from there, that's a portal to my world. So welcome in.
Amen.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing part of your world with us. I'd love to have you back on. I'm sure I speak for everybody here when I say that.
Yes.
And I'd love to do some breath work with you and try your kombucha when I make it down to Seattle and hang with Luke.
Let's do that.
It would be an honor, honestly. And this was a very refreshing conversation for me, and I'm sure everybody else as well. There are definitely some takeaways that I'm sure I'll forget them in 3 weeks and need a refresher and have to come back to this episode. But I feel
why we record
very, very refreshed after our conversation. So thank you.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you.
And then the way we sign out every week is we give them a peace and a peace among worlds.
Woo!
I told him it means peace among worlds, Morty. Just do it.
I like it.
All right, humans, thank you so much for being here with us yet again. Thank you so much. Shouts to Spencer Tribwell for being here with us and dropping gems. Follow him at Creative Living and Friends on Instagram. You can find more episodes, socials, free sound packs, all that stuff at thehumanmusicpodcast.com. Support our sponsors, Dojo TV, free producer live stream classes from the Dojo Senseis, and every other week, we do a live podcast at 6 p.m. Pacific over there. You can join in the chat, hang out with us, ask questions, all that good stuff. Tesko's Patreon, where you can get access to his Discord, private Discord, track feedback, private lessons, and much more. The weekly download, where you can learn from our mentor Il Gates and his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. For real, the best producer deal on the internet. Could not recommend the weekly download more. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. Song of the week, again, is Tesko, Friends. Go click the links down below to run that up. Thank you very much. Shouts out to our boy Tesko for this dope song you're hearing behind us. And, until next week, humans, give you a peace out and a peace among worlds.